If they like their federal funding, they'll have to overhaul the department that oversees Middle East, South Asian, and African studies.
One story is not going to change this, but one story building off of another does start to have a narrative.
Conservatives used to not be okay with the government telling private institutions what they can and cannot teach.
They don't have.
Let's hop into another CNN panel, this time as they break down Trump's unconstitutional attacks on diversity and immigrants' rights. So take a second, hit the like button. I really appreciate it a bunch if you guys would, and let's get right into the video.
The Trump administration is also making big demands of Columbia University, saying if they like their federal funding, they'll have to overhaul the department that oversees Middle East, South Asian, and African studies, in addition to major changes to student discipline and admissions rules. This is the case of Mahmoud Khalil is on the free speech front going to be very interesting to watch play out. But what Trump is doing when it comes to Columbia's curriculum is also something that we have never seen.
Yeah, this is what you do in a dictatorship, that you tell them what you can teach the people. This is frightening and disgusting. If this went through, this would completely ruin one of the great institutions in America, because who would want to go there after he destroys? And how precise. The Asian, you said, the African, and the Middle Eastern departments. How interesting that he is targeting those departments. Again, another attack on people of color.
This is by and far the most white supremacist, dictatorial presidential administration we've ever seen in America. Like, it's not even close. Never before has a president overreached into the private education sector as to control what they can and cannot teach. This is censorship of an astronomical level from the party that claimed they were being censored. It's also blatantly and unapologetically racist. He's targeting the studies of brown people, the history of people of color, and threatening federal funds to leverage this power, all while systemically targeting these same peoples and deporting them en masse without due process. America is quickly losing its liberalism and democracy, and I don't know how long we just sit around and watch this happen. I mean, we have Democrats still voting with these lunatics to help them pass legislation as they defy the Constitution day after day.
One story is not going to change this, but one story building off of another does start to have a narrative of what you're talking about. Folks are like, oh, maybe them Democrats was right about democracy. Just saying.
Guys, we must have missed what happened last summer, these protests on these universities. The violence, the disrespect. People were paying hard-earned money to go to these universities, and thugs shut it down. And what the Trump administration is saying is, like, it is a privilege to be in the United States. You have a visa. You're expected to behave a certain way. You can't be disruptive on universities. You can't,
protest in America?
I said you can't be disruptive in universities when kids are trying to take students.
Yeah, but
People
why?
can
It's like
protest.
actually
There's parks.
You're talking about protest. You're not talking about. You're not talking about the shutting down of teaching.
You're shutting down schools.
But what does that have to do with teaching in the university?
Shut down schools.
Brian,
but what does that have to do with the teaching?
Yeah, first, the idea of protesting would have anything to do with justifying why Trump is removing African and Middle Eastern studies is just stupidity. It's just an attack on diversity from racist white supremacists. Own it. If you're going to vote for it, just own it. Don't be a coward about it. Second, protesting is constitutionally protected as free speech under the First Amendment. If someone violates the law while protesting, they should be prosecuted. And if they're on visa and that prosecution warrants deportation, that's one thing. That's another conversation. But what we're talking about is Trump deporting students who are lawfully protesting. Mahmoud Khalil committed no crimes, was charged with no crimes, and had no due process, no day in court. The idea that the president alone can just arbitrarily deem something as worthy of deportation and then deport lawful residents on that is the most unconstitutional thing I've ever heard. Republicans, literally anyone defending this, they can never consider themselves the party of the Constitution again.
I remember when conservatives used to not be okay with the government telling private institutions what they can and cannot teach.
They don't have to listen
and
to
so
that. They don't have to take the money.
I remember that. And so it's interesting to me the hypocrisy here with this. It's okay now when it's your agenda. This is very scary. I don't agree with what happened on those campuses. I was very much on the other side. I thought what was going on was awful. But however, Columbia and a multitude of other universities that Donald Trump is threatening, they have a right to have their own curriculums. And for him to be like a mafioso boss saying, if you don't do what we want, we're going to withhold the money, is crazy. They're withholding money from PhD programs.
Turns out it was all complete bullshit from the right, which now isn't a surprise. Maybe 10 years ago it would have been, but they never actually believed in no government overreach in private business. What they really meant is, businesses shouldn't have to comply with liberal practices like like anti-discrimination. Like, why can't we discriminate against black people or not serve gay people or whatever? Worker safety standards. Like, the government shouldn't force us to comply with these things. But Republicans are the most authoritarian party ever. Like, we're seeing this play out in real time. We've never had a president this authoritarian. The second they don't like something, the government just attacks it. The government's now removing DEI from public and private sectors and threatening private sectors to comply. They're banning books from private institutions, threatening funding to get them to comply, banning women and trans men from private sports institutions, threatening these institutions to comply, now telling schools what they can and can't teach, but like, at least we're destroying woke, destroying and owning the libs. So like, who cares if that means that we're eroding away our rights and adding precedents for more rights in the future to be taken away from more groups of people and slowly becoming a fascist, dictatorial, authoritarian type of country?